Hello everyone, it's John Wheatcroft here and I hope you're well, bringing you another Sunday Q&A. We're up to week number 43 and I'm excited to tell you that some gigs have been coming in. Feels like lockdown is for once beginning to make signs of improving, so there is some work coming in. I'm really excited to tell you that yesterday I got a chance to have a performance, a Facebook Live performance with my good friend Mickey Dunn on his channel. It's Liverpool Jazz Guitar. He's been doing these things on a Saturday called Lockdown Licks. And yesterday I was thrilled to be invited to perform with him. We did about a 90-minute performance. It flew by in about a second. It was such an enjoyable thing. So something a little bit different for you this week. What I've decided to do is share a little excerpt from our performance of Donna Lee. Amongst other things we played last night. That was one of the high points for me. So I've given you a little bit of that performance. So rather than me playing by myself, it's just so great to play with such a great player as Mickey, but it's just so great to just play jazz music with another human being. So that was going to be my first point really, before we get stuck into the questions and before we deal with the music. And that is to say, particularly if you're interested in improvised music, especially jazz, it's definitely something that you pick up by doing. I don't think there's any good jazz musicians out there at all who figured this out just by playing completely by themselves and not by playing with other musicians. You pick up such a lot about the nuances. You pick up such a lot about self-critique. You figure out what works and what doesn't work pretty quickly when you're playing with somebody else. You also figure out about interplay, about being supportive, about taking the lead when you need to, but then also about allowing someone else to take the lead, about trying to make them sound as good as you possibly can when you're accompanying. All of these skills, they're really difficult to learn in isolation, and it's one of the problems, I guess, with lockdown. It's really affected some of the things that you might practice, some of the things that you might work on when developing your music. There's some things, of course, you can work on quite comfortably by yourself. We're going to be looking at some of those today, doing things like using the metronome when we practice as a practice device and so on. But there's such a lot of other stuff, the nuance, the communication, the whole kind of interplay and just getting it together. There's one thing about how you might think you play, then there's another reality check sometimes as in how you play. And you only really get to that from playing with other musicians. So thing number one today is, if you can, when things allow you to do so, I'd suggest that you try and factor it into your weekly practice or weekly development, whatever you want to call it. Any opportunity you can to play with like-minded individuals. It's such a great thing. It's a lot of fun and it's a great motivating factor in terms of then knowing what to go back into the practice room and work on for the next time that you do this. The more often that you do it, the better that you become, the more refined and the more efficient your practice will become, because you'll see which things actually work and which things don't, which things make a difference when you get into that performance situation. It doesn't necessarily need to be a live thing as well. It could literally just be, in the summer, go to the park or what have you, or go and sit out in someone's garden, take two guitars, when you're allowed to do this, of course. Now, I hope you enjoy our performance. As I say, it's just a short excerpt from Donna Lee. As always, enjoy the music, and I'll see you on the other side for the questions. enjoyed that short section. I, for one, certainly did. Our hour and a half performance flew by in what felt like about 5 minutes. It was so great to play again. If you want to check out the rest of the performance, you can find it on Mickey's Facebook channel, Mickey Dunne, Dunne, or you can find him on Liverpool Jazz Guitar. It's called Lockdown Licks. Now, Mickey does this every Saturday, so I'd urge you to check it out. There's some amazing talent in Liverpool, including Mickey, of course. And it's always great. It's always great to see. Myself and Mickey are going to be doing this again in 2 weeks' time, which will be Saturday the 27th, if memory serves correct. So if you could join us there, we'd really appreciate it. You can shout out requests, and it's just really nice just to see the reaction in real time. It's not, of course, the same as playing to a real audience, which gives you a pretty clear indication if you're going down well. Of course, when you're playing to a camera, sometimes you get the reaction later on. So it's a different experience, but we'll take what we can at the moment in time, you know. Performances are few and far between, so I'm quite happy to just, it's all great, you know. I can't wait to play in front of a real audience, but for now, we're just grateful for what we can have. And then 2 days later, on the 29th, that's the Monday, I'm playing with another fantastic guitar player, the Italian ace, Francesco Locastro. We're doing the thing in Greenwich. I think that's with a quartet, I believe. And again, same deal, socially distanced. We'll all be tested, and it's for work, so we're allowed to do it. Again, same deal. We're going to get a chance to play. It'll be a lot of fun. So I'll give you some Facebook details as and when they become available, and hopefully you can join us for that. I hope that you enjoy these things, and I hope that you can support us. Even just a like or a comment or a share really makes a difference. We need all the help we can get in the arts at the moment. The pandemic has hit this sector pretty hard. So if we can all help each other and support each other, then hopefully we'll get through to the other side. Anyway, on with the questions. Alex sent me a great question asking if I could expand upon a concept that I touched upon a few weeks earlier, where I was talking about taking voicings or ideas that were based upon particular chord patterns and then moving them through the scale diatonically to create a set of variations and permutations. Rather similar to the way that Alan Holdsworth might consider chords, rather than seeing things as being kind of blocks of sound. Not a million miles away from the material we were looking at last time, although where we looked at drop 2 voicings and we moved them through each of the inversions. This is a similar concept, although instead of moving it through the chord tones, here we're moving them through the modal tones. So meaning, for example, if I were to play, if we go back to our drop 2 voicings again, and we were to play A minor, say A minor 7, we might take a voicing like so, for A minor 7, which is configured with the 5th as the lowest note, and the 7th is the highest note, and then our drop 2 voicing concept is to move each of the notes along 1 in the chord, so the 5th becomes the 7th, and the 7th becomes the root, and so on and so forth, where the 7 becomes the root, and now what was the root becomes the 3rd, and we fill that in, and the notes in the middle have moved as well, but just for the sake of brevity, we'll just deal with the outside edges so that we don't have to name every note each and every time. But it's useful to acknowledge the fact that those middle notes are changing too. And then we go to the next inversion, and then we're back to where we began. We can take a similar concept to moving through chord inversions, to moving both chord voicings and melodic motific cells through the scale by moving 1 note at a time. You hear the chord voicing ideas very present in players like Alan Holdsworth, Pat Metheny, even John Petrucci, those kind of guys. Whereas the motific idea, where you move a particular phrase, melody, whatever it might be, through each of the notes of the scale, a really good exponent for that could be someone like Jonathan Kreisberg, Joshua Redman, those kind of players. They're definitely musicians that have worked on this concept. So let's begin with the idea of just taking a simple chordal fragment and we're going to move that through the scale. So everything we're going to do in this particular section will be coming from A minor, and it's helpful if we can select modal choice where all of the notes are plausible as extensions. That's where Dorian really makes his presence felt. Such a great scale because all 7 of the notes all work, either they work as fundamental chord tones, or they work as plausible extensions. There are no real kind of void notes, any notes where you might think, oh, that flat 6 is rubbing against the chord, so maybe we shouldn't use that one. Or like in major, where we have the perfect 4th against the major 3rd. As a general rule of thumb, what we're looking for here is to try and avoid any kind of rub that's a semitone above a fundamental triadic or 7th type chord tone. So for example, well, the 7th actually not so bad, the triad really is the problem. So for example, if you have the root, the flat 9 sounds like a tension. If you have a major 3rd, the 4th sounds like a tension, but it's not so tense against the minor 3rd because it's a tone away. If you have a perfect 5th, flat 6 is going to sound like it's rubbing against the 5, whereas a major 6th is not going to be so bad. And Dorian has all of those. It has a tone above the root, it has the tone above, it has the tone above the 3rd, so 3 and 4, has a tone above the 5 and major 6. So, okay, so let's invent a little chord fragment. So we choose this one. It's going to be our chord fragment. Just, it could be anything. But I'm going to see that now, instead of it being a specific A minor, and we can acknowledge the intervals here, of course, the 7, the minor 3rd, and the 11 or the 4, if you like. I'm going to see this more as a stack of intervals. We've got a perfect 4th and a 2nd. And that's going to be our voicing. Okay, now, assuming we know the scale well enough that I can track this in 3 different on 3 different strings at the same time, then I can now move this voicing up or down the string by 1 degree within A Dorian, which is the same notes as a G major scale. So if that's something that's tricky for you, then what I suggest you do is you do it 1 string at a time. So the B string, of course, is going to go D. I could go down to C, up to D, to E, to F sharp, to G, to A, to B, C, to D. Okay. At the same time, we'll add a string to this. On our 3rd string, we've got, of course, a C, and we can go up or down A Dorian, G major scale. On that string, we do that independently. C, B, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. If I put those 2 strings together, I should have the following. That makes sense? So what was happening there was the B string, the G string, put the 2 together. So some of those are minor seconds, some of those are major seconds. You can figure out which are which. Okay, then we do the same thing on the 3rd string now. So the third string of our 3-string chord, which is actually the 4th string. So that's A Dorian along that string. I put the 2 together, or the 3 together maybe. I get this chord here. So in Holdsworth's world, they're all A minor. Or in his world, that's an A with a cross sign, looks like a multiple sign, like an X, AX, which means A minor with a major 6th. That's what his symbol is for that. Okay, so we. But that makes sense. Now, of course, we're not restricted to just this particular stack of intervals. But one that he likes to do is put the 6th on top of that. A stretchy one here. A beautiful A minor sound, and not one that you're likely to pick up in the usual kind of chord book location. Of course, these ideas can be reflected as single note lines. You can always arpeggiate. Take your whatever you've got as a chord shape, reflected as a single note line. Of course, maybe that's a subject for another day. But let's just to recap here. Let's go back to our first voicing. We've got it's the lowest one. I suppose that's the lowest one actually. So that is super slow. Scale, the semitone gap on the top string there. That beautiful one, my favourite probably out of all of them really. Of course, you're not restricted to these intervals, you can use any. One of the things that I like to do as a kind of a game, as it were, is just pick some numbers, and see what I can come up with. So if I come up with, fourth and a second, that's going to give me on the top strings, this kind of thing. So similar intervals in that case, but and then you could put like a seventh, and then that's going to move through the scale. You can work that through. Of course, one of the ones that's very popular is the stack of fourths. That kind of thing, which we've looked at a few times, I think. Seconds can sound really cool, particularly if you mix them with another more consonant interval. So for example, here's a second between the first and second string, and then I'll play fourth between the second and the third. And of course that could be moved through the scale. Is it this? That. So again, these things can be arpeggiated to create lines. Let's just go back to the first one again, just to make sure that we're absolutely clear what we're talking about here. So we started off with this voicing, which is a perfect fourth and a second. And the idea was to move it diatonically through the scale, rather like we'd move the chord voicings through the scale. So if I know where the next step behind is, it gives me these three notes. D goes down to a C, the C goes to a B, and so on, the G to an F sharp. Okay, and then we go up one. C goes to D goes to an E, C goes to D, G goes to A. One again. Now in this instance, same shape. Now what we have here is not a parallel motion, a similar motion, where our B goes to C and our E goes to F sharp, so they're going to go different distances, whilst the F sharp goes to G, gives us this shape. Of course, I can do this with melodic minor scale as well, whatever, which you could put that note in there, but for now we're doing Dorian. Okay, and then we're back to that's kind of the default shape really. Semitones involved. So that happens 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Yeah, deviates there 5 times. So there's 2 times where it deviates. That makes sense. So from open with that square shape, if you want to think of it that way, then an angle back to the square shape for the second time, the square shape for the third time, fourth time, this thing, however you want to think of that, splayed out kind of stretchy shape, back to the squared off shape for the fifth time, and then we're up to the octave of where we began. So So that's how you do this with chords. Next up, we'll do it with a single note line. Whilst I associate this technique with the guitarist Jonathan Kreisberg and with the saxophonist Joshua Redman, the phrase that I'm going to use to demonstrate it is coming from the amazing French virtuoso gypsy jazz guitarist Adrien Moyard. Now, Adrien's version of this is a 6-string phrase, so we'll work our way to that 6-string phrase. But we're going to begin by looking at the top 3 strings, and we're going to move this phrase throughout the entire scale. We're going to stick to A Dorian, so we're going to stick to this sound. And the phrase is a 6-note idea that goes... Okay, and it's going to be starting on the last 16th of beat 3. So it goes 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and. Okay, so there's our 6-note phrase. So it's kind of like an A minor triad with an added 4th. So it goes 3, 4, 5, octave, 3, 2, if you want to see it that way. Put a hammer on the G string. So 5th fret, 7th fret, 5th, 5th, 8th, 7th, if you want to see it that way. Okay, so our job now is to take that idea and move it along the scale, 1 note per time. Now you could do what we did with the chord and break little bits of the scale down. So say we took that section of our phrase, make certain that you're okay with. Before you move any further. So that's a kind of like simplified version. And we can expand that 1 note at a time. So there's adding the B string. So in itself, that's kind of like one of those chord moves talked about a second ago, where you can take the chord and use the chord as a basis for finding single note lines, or you could just see it as a melodic motif. Remember, we've got our... Let's move this phrase diatonically throughout the scale. So our initial phrase is... Let's go down and take in the lower positions. Okay, and the next one is... So we go from our lowest position of A minor. Then... Now you might find it helpful to see some kind of triadic reference point here, rather like our initial phrase that we looked at maybe a couple of weeks ago, where I took this kind of chord shape and moved it through the scale. So we can see this happening in that phrase. If that helps you, you might find that that's useful. It depends upon the nature of the phrase, I guess. However you do it, to recognize that whenever you play from the C note, it's always going to be an augmented 4th. Why? Well, we're in the key of G, and what happens from C has got an augmented 4th associated with it, C Lydian. And when we harmonize A Dorian from G, perfect 4th, from A, perfect 4th, B, perfect 4th, C, raised 4th. So if we can acknowledge that, then hopefully we'll be in a good place. So let's run this again. Here's our chords. Here's our phrase. That's our 3-string version. Next, let's look at a 6-string version expanded from this small half of the lick, as it were. let's take a little look at the bottom half of the phrase before we connect the two together. So the bottom half of these phrases is based upon a stack of fifths, diatonic fifths. So from A, we would have a perfect fifth and a perfect fifth, like so. And rather like we can with the chord shapes, we can move it throughout the scale, moving up or down diatonically. I can do the same thing with my stack of fifths. So in this case, we're harmonizing the G major scale, but from the perspective of A. So what's interesting is to know where is the flat 5. There's only one. They're all perfect fifths, with one exception. And again, if we take our G scale of G, you have a perfect fifth of A, perfect fifth of B, perfect fifth, C, perfect, D, perfect, E, perfect, F sharp, flat 5. So if I know that, wherever I hit the F sharp, like here, to keep it diatonic to that scale, it needs to flatten. Happens again here. So if I wanted to harmonize the scale, I would have E, no problem there, there's no F sharp in that particular stack yet, assuming I only keep it to 3. When I go to the F sharp, of course it's F sharp. G, clear. A, clear. B is not clear because it goes B, F sharp, flat 5, yeah. C, clear, D, clear, E. So now I've got the bottom half of my phrase is going to be so it changes there. So there's 2 that we need to concern ourselves with. That's this one, which is F sharp, and then C, and then G. Okay. And then we have this one, which is B, F sharp, and once again F sharp to C. The only one that we don't really need to worry about is when the F sharp occurs as the highest of the 3 notes, like here. We would have to concern ourselves with it if the next note were another consecutive fifth, in which case then it would be a flattened fifth. But as it stands, they're the only 2 shapes. This one, which is from the 6th of A, if we're seeing this as A minor, and this one, which is from the 2nd of A, if we're seeing this as an A minor phrase. Okay, so one more time, just for luck. And that's the bottom half of what is now going to be a more complete 6-string phrase. Let's now connect the front and the back end of our licks together, or the top and the bottom, maybe is a more accurate way of describing this. So we put the 5th idea connected to the decorated triadic idea, and we have the following. So that might be in and of itself a beautiful phrase, but we can develop this now. We have 7 different versions. Like the way I can take my chord and move it along. I can take my phrase play from any degree of the scale there I chose, from the root, then the 3rd and the 5th. But let's do it diatonically through each, so we have all 7 available to us. So first off, we'll start from here. We work our way down, then we work our way back up again, and then you can be selective. You know, of course, you don't have to play the whole phrase. This is an exercise. So from the root, we have, and I won't do any expansion. I'll just play it completely straight. from the 7th, or the root of the host key, as it were. So it's A Dorian coming from G major. So see that however you will. I see that as the 7th personally, because I think of A Dorian as an independent thing. Even though it comes from G major, it really is A Dorian, so it pays to think of it as A Dorian. So this is the 7th of A Dorian. But I can play it against A minor really successfully. Okay, from the 6th of A Dorian, that is tricky. It's by far the trickiest. It's got this kind of like profile, it's got a kind of unusual profile to follow. It's quite unique. In fact, it's got the flat 5 there. But it beautifully addresses the minor 7 there. Here we have, again, the other anomaly with the perfect 5th idea. I won't do any embellishments. I love this one. From the 4th degree, and to complete the set from the 5th, which is identical to the first one, just transposed. So the complete set from low to high. I'll do this pretty slow. The G, from the A, from the B, from the C, from the D, and that leaves us one more from the E. This makes sense. Now, of course, here we're using a fairly involved phrase to demonstrate this principle. You could take something really simple. Take Layla. I'm gonna run out of frets. Right, so I'm taking this shape. We know the famous phrase. And if I move that all one again, so you can take anything, absolutely any phrase, and this has become something that I regularly include in my practice routine, is trying to take anything that I've got down, any kind of melodic idea. Can I take it and move it up or down by one note of the scale? And if I can't play it, then I need to know why not. Sometimes it won't work if you've got something that's got a particular relationship between notes that are in the harmony and the notes that are actually, say, chromaticism, where you might be approaching 2 notes from a tone. Then you move it up one, you don't have the gap between those notes, so it won't allow the exact same rhythmic phrase to be juxtaposed from every degree. So there we have to kind of find other ways and use different kind of chromaticism ideas. But that might be another subject that if you're interested in, I could cover that in coming weeks. I hope for now that gives you something to get stuck into. Just the principle of whatever you can play, can you move it up or down by 1 degree in the scale? Of course, I've chosen the scale of A Dorian. It could be any scale as well. So the limitations to this, well, there are none really. Just how far you can take this with your imagination, and also how well you know the scales. Wayne sent me a great question about some methods, how you might employ using a metronome when you practice. It's one of those weird things that everybody says, buy a metronome and use a metronome when you play, but not very many people talk about how you might actually use a metronome when you practice. Fortunately, I've picked up a few tricks along the way, from certain guitar players and also from drummers and just musicians in general as to how you might use the metronome creatively. So this might be something we're going to revisit over the coming weeks. But just to begin with, I'm just going to give you some very, very simple ways to use a modern metronome. I use this one, computer one, as well as I'm surrounded by physical, there you go, these things. I like real things as well. I'm showing my age. Actual objects are cool. Yeah, there's a few up there. The beauty of a modern metronome, of course, is as opposed to a mechanical one, is you can do fancy things like getting it to click on various beats. You can get it to subdivide the beat in different ways, whereas a mechanical metronome, you can do it, but you've got to be a bit, you kind of got to select tempos where you can half the tempo, and even then it's not guaranteed it's going to be 100% accurate. So with this, I've got my metronome set to 80 beats per minute, but I've got it set at quavers at the moment. So it's going to feel like, well, as if it's 160 beats per minute, but clicking on every beat. Okay, but I'm doing this so that just by turning some of the beats off, I can have the metronome less frequently, so that instead of it giving me the time, it's testing my time. So if I play, say, a bluesy type idea, so that's giving me every quarter note. So now if I take away that eighth note subdivision and I just make a quarter note at 80, that's now giving me the 2 and 4, which is much nicer. And that's the typical thing you hear players like Emily Remler talk about. Oh, the metronome on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's kind of quite a commonplace thing to do. So say we go from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So if I take away now beats 1 and 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3. Now it's just going to click on B4. Allow yourself a minute to get into that. 1, 2. Now it's not quite so simple as you're always perfectly in time. In fact, you're probably never perfectly in time. All we're doing is adjusting. When we find ourselves going a little bit too quick or a little bit too slow, you're just pulling back or speeding up just to pull ourselves into time. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Development of the clicking each bar in 4 idea could be as follows. So let's try this. We'll start with the end of each bar in 4. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Spend some time with that. quick suggestion with these metronome ideas is try not to view time with your eyes, if that makes sense. It's tricky not to fall into the trap of trying to look at the metronome and see if it's flashing in time or anything like that to give you any kind of clues. I always find I lock in much better if I don't do that at all, and you sometimes see me staring off into space, and that's when I'm really trying to concentrate onto the music as opposed to trying to get some kind of a clue from somewhere else, you know. That's it for number 43. There we have it. I hope you managed to get something useful from this, and I hope you enjoyed our performance at the head of this video. As always, thanks once again for getting so far. It really means a lot to see so many views, so many really lovely comments. Thanks for all the really great shares and messages and whatnot. So any questions or anything that you think that I might be able to do justice to, even just a suggestion for a tune, please get them in. I'm only going to do this now until week 52, so less than 10 left, and that'll fly by. I mean, blimey, we're on week number 43. Feels like 5 minutes. So I don't know where the time goes, but it's going. So I've got another 9 weeks left. I've got some great questions already for next week. So please get them in. Please spread the word. Don't forget that all of the existing remaining 42 other versions of this video, they're all on YouTube. They're all still up on Facebook, and they will remain so for quite some time. So I hope you get a lot from this. I hope you're staying safe. Take care of yourself. Yeah, don't forget, get those questions in before we run out of time. And have a great week. Don't forget as well, myself and Mickey will be performing online again on the 27th. I'll be performing with Francesco Lacastro on the 29th. So hopefully you can catch one of those too. Take care of yourself. See you next week for number 4.